Hey everyone, and welcome back. I'm always fascinated by energy storage, and I bet you are too.
It's definitely a hot topic these days.
It is. But what if I told you we could learn a thing or two about energy storage by taking a trip way back in time?
Hmm.
Like way, way back to our early human ancestors.
You've got a point there. Our ancestors were masters of energy storage, even without all the fancy tech we have today.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. They figured out how to store energy to survive. And it's not just about keeping warm or having a full belly. Their energy innovations were crucial for brain power, and that ultimately shaped how we evolved.
Absolutely.
So today we're going deep on that connection between energy storage and early humanity.
We're going to uncover some seriously ingenious methods they use. We're talking pre-electricity, pre-battery.
Pre-everything. Okay, so no fridges, no power plants.
Yeah.
How did they even begin to tackle this whole energy storage thing? Paint me a picture here.
Well, for starters, think food preservation.
Food preservation, right. Keeping those hard-earned meals from going bad. But how do they manage that without, refrigeration?
They were incredibly resourceful. They dried meat in the sun, smoked it over fires, and even figured out ways to store seeds and nuts for long periods.
That's amazing. And fruits too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Drying fruits was a key method to make sure they had something to eat even when those fruits weren't in season.
Okay, so smart move for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But what does all this have to do with our brains?
Well, the human brain, as you know, is a real energy hog.
It's true. Mine's running on overdrive right now.
It gobbles up about 20% of our body's energy. That's huge, considering it only makes up about 2% of our weight.
Whoa, that's a lot of energy for such a small organ.
Exactly. So a reliable food supply wasn't just about survival, it was about fueling those energy-hungry brains. And, the more energy they had, the more those brains could develop and grow.
So the better they got at storing food, the more their brains could grow and the
Mm-hmm.
smarter they became.
It's a remarkable cycle. It was a huge driving force in our evolution. The more their brains developed, the more they could improve their hunting and gathering techniques and come up with even more sophisticated ways to store their food.
It's like this incredible feedback loop.
Exactly. They were constantly innovating, pushing the boundaries of what was possible.
It makes you wonder, what else did they come up with?
Well, speaking of pushing boundaries, let's talk about fire.
Okay, fire. Now that's what I call a game changer.
It was revolutionary, not just for warmth and cooking,
Oh, right.
Fire was an incredible form of energy storage.
Because it provided a way to access heat and light on demand.
Exactly. Suddenly they weren't limited by the sun. They could cook food more effectively, scare off predators.
I bet it even helped extend the day, giving them more time to work and socialize.
Absolutely. But controlling fire, that required some serious brain power, too. Think about it. You had to gather firewood, find a way to start the fire, and then figure out how to keep it going.
Yeah, not exactly as simple as flicking a lighter, right?
Not at all. And they had to think ahead, plan for the future, make sure they had enough wood to last through the night or even through bad weather.
So it wasn't just about the physical act of building a fire.
No, it was about developing foresight, planning skills. It probably even pushed them to work together.
Cooperation, community, all those things we still rely on today.
Exactly.
So fire wasn't just a source of energy. It was like this spark that ignited all these incredible cognitive skills.
It's pretty mind-blowing when you think about it.
It really is. But we're just scratching the surface here, right?
Oh, yeah. There's another fascinating energy storage method our ancestors mastered, and it might surprise you.
Oh, okay. Now you've got me intrigued. What else did they figure out? Lay it on me.
Let's talk about fermentation.
Fermentation, you mean like beer and wine? Wait, how's that energy storage?
Oh, I know. It sounds a little strange. But trust me, fermentation was a brilliant way for them to store food for longer periods and even make it safer and more energy-rich.
Okay. I'm listening.
Think about it. They had mead, which is honey wine, from thousands of years ago, and evidence of fermented milk from around 10,000 BCE.
Wow.
And get this, there's even evidence of early beers dating back 13,000 years.
So they were brewing up energy drinks way before Red Bull was a thing.
Mm-hmm.
But seriously, how did they even stumble upon these techniques? Were they just lucky?
Well, maybe a little bit of luck was involved at first, but it was more than that.
Right.
They had to observe, experiment, and then pass that knowledge down through generations. Remember, this was all without microscopes or any understanding of microbiology.
It's like they were the original citizen scientists, just tinkering around and changing the world without even realizing it.
Absolutely. And those early forms of energy storage, they really paved the way for some incredible advancements.
So what happened next? How did these early energy hacks set the stage for everything that came after?
Well, one of the most important outcomes was the ability to support larger and more stable populations. Having reliable food and energy sources meant they were less vulnerable to those feast or famine cycles.
So they could finally catch a break from that constant struggle for survival.
Exactly. And when you have a larger, more stable population, you start to see something really interesting happen. Not everyone has to focus on hunting and gathering all the time.
Right, because they have more resources.
Precisely. So they could start specializing in different tasks. Some could focus on building better shelters, crafting tools.
While others could develop new skills and technologies.
Exactly. It was a huge step towards the complex societies we live in today, and it all started with the ability to store energy reliably.
It's amazing how one innovation leads to another. It's like dominoes falling, each one setting off the next.
And speaking of dominoes, I think we need to talk about agriculture and its role in this whole energy storage story.
Oh yes, agriculture. I have a feeling that's a pretty big piece of the puzzle, right?
Absolutely.
So how does farming tie into this energy storage theme?
Well, think of it this way. Cultivated crops, they're like a form of storable energy.
So instead of just storing the food they found, they were now actively growing and managing their energy sources.
Precisely. And this was a game changer. Agriculture allowed them to produce a surplus of food, which of course fueled population growth and spurred all sorts of technological advances.
And led to even more sophisticated ways to store and manage energy. It's mind-blowing to think about all this. From drying meat in the sun, to controlling fire, to cultivating crops. It's like each innovation built on the last one, creating this incredible chain reaction that brought us to where we are today.
And to think they did all this without any of the technology we take for granted.
It really is a testament to human ingenuity.
It is.
And it makes you wonder what we can learn from our resourceful ancestors as we face our own modern-day energy challenges.
It's a question worth pondering. We might have fancier tools, but the fundamental challenges of energy storage, those haven't changed all that much.
So true. What can we glean from those who came before us? How can we tap into that same spirit of innovation to create a more sustainable and energy-abundant future?
It's fascinating to think about, isn't it? They faced incredible challenges, and yet they found ways to not only survive, but thrive.
It's inspiring, really.
Yeah.
And it makes you realize that maybe we're not so different from those early humans after all. We're still driven by that same need to find creative solutions to our energy challenges.
Absolutely. We're all part of that same story of human ingenuity.
And speaking of ingenuity, there's one more piece of this energy puzzle that we need to explore.
Oh.
One that had huge implications for human development. Trade?
Ah, yes. Trading, exchanging those valuable resources. Early humans were definitely no strangers to that.
Right? Bartering, swapping goods and services.
Right.
But how does energy storage fit into all of this? Was it all about, like, trading dried meat for nuts or something?
Well, think about it. If you have a surplus of dried fish, for example, or a bunch of extra nuts you've gathered, you can only trade those goods if they're not going to rot before they reach someone who needs them.
That's a good point. You wouldn't want to barter away your precious preserved food only to have it spoil a few days later. What a waste.
Exactly. Food preservation, it was essential for those early trade networks to develop. It made those longer journeys and exchanges possible.
I never thought about it that way. So they were carrying their dried meat, their fermented drinks, and probably even bags of salt to help preserve everything along the way.
Salt was a big one. Essential for preserving food, especially in areas where it wasn't readily available. It was like their prehistoric refrigerator, you know?
Ah, that makes sense. Salt was like gold back then.
In a way, it was. And this ability to trade, it had a ripple effect on early human societies. It meant that people could access resources they couldn't find or produce in their own local environments.
So like a group that lived near the coast could trade their surplus of dried fish for tools or pottery made by a group that lived further inland. Right.
Exactly. And as those trade networks expanded, so did the flow of knowledge and ideas.
So it wasn't just about the goods themselves.
No, it was about sharing new ways of doing things, different technologies that fueled even more innovation.
Wow, it's like another layer of that virtuous cycle we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
Energy storage leads to more surplus leads to more trade leads to more diversity and specialization, and that in turn leads to even more innovation and development. It's incredible.
It's a beautiful illustration of how interconnected those early advancements were. It all underscores the importance of energy storage in shaping the course of human history.
Okay, so we've got food, we've got salt, What other kinds of things were they trading?
Oh, all sorts of things. They traded tools made from stone, bone, wood. Materials like animal hides were popular, shells, pigments, anything that had value.
It must have been an incredibly challenging but also an exciting time to be alive. Just imagine trekking across those vast landscapes with your goods, meeting new people, exchanging ideas.
It was a pivotal period for sure, and it all goes back to those early innovations in energy storage. Remember, early humans, they weren't just focused on bare survival. They had this drive, this desire to make their lives better, to build a better future.
And that's a spirit that we could all learn from, right?
Absolutely. They were pioneers in their own way, laying the groundwork for civilization as we know it. And they did it all without smartphones, the internet, any of the modern conveniences we rely on today.
It really puts our own challenges into perspective.
It does. And it begs the question, what can we learn from their resourcefulness, their creativity? How can we apply those lessons to the energy challenges we face in our modern world?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? We may have different technologies at our disposal, but the core challenges of energy storage, those haven't changed all that much. So what can we learn from those who came before us? How can we tap into that same spirit of innovation, that ingenuity, to create a future where energy is abundant and sustainable for everyone?
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How much we can learn from those who came before us.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't have solar panels or lithium-ion batteries or any of that, but they were masters of adaptation. They really understood how to work with nature to meet their needs.
And they were incredibly resourceful. You know, one of the biggest takeaways for me is the importance of diversity when it comes to energy storage.
Diversity, how so?
Well, they didn't rely on just one method.
Right.
They had all these different strategies in place, each one suited to their specific environment and resources.
Okay, so like drying meat, storing seeds and nuts, fermenting food, mastering fire. It was like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly. They weren't putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. It's a lesson that's just as relevant today as it was back then.
So you're saying we need to be thinking about a whole range of energy storage solutions, not just relying on one or two.
Absolutely. Different solutions will have different strengths and weaknesses, right? So the best approach is likely going to involve a mix of strategies, each one tailored to specific needs and circumstances.
Makes sense. But what about the social aspect? We've talked about how fire and food storage really seem to encourage cooperation and community building. Do you think there's a lesson there for us as well?
Oh, absolutely. Just like our ancestors, we need to be working together to solve these energy challenges.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take collaboration between scientists, engineers, policymakers, and we need to be involving communities too.
So it's not just about finding the right technologies. It's about fostering a sense of shared responsibility, right?
Exactly.
Collective action. We're all in this together.
Just like those early humans. They had to learn to share resources, share knowledge, to survive and thrive. And in a way, we do too.
Well, this has been an absolutely fascinating deep dive. I am seriously blown away by the ingenuity of our ancestors.
Me too.
I mean, no fancy gadgets, no advanced technology, and yet they achieved so much.
Yeah.
Their resourcefulness really laid the foundation for everything we have today.
It's a reminder that the human spirit of innovation, that desire to solve problems and create a better future, it's timeless.
And by looking back and understanding their challenges, their successes, maybe we can glean some valuable insights for our own time.
Absolutely.
So the next time you're reaching for a snack from your fully stocked pantry or flipping on a light switch, take a moment to appreciate the incredible journey that brought us to this point. All those innovations, large and small, that have shaped our world. And maybe, just maybe, we can channel a little bit of that ancient ingenuity as we strive to create a more sustainable and energy-abundant future for ourselves and for generations to come.
It's a legacy worth fighting for.
And on that note, this has been your deep dive into early humans and their surprising energy storage skills. Keep those brains buzzing, and we'll catch you on the next dive.
This podcast is conceived and produced by Energy Intelligence. We make India's best power station. Only power station that is super portable and has uninterrupted power supply for applications like Geo Air Fiber, Mac Mini, and other medical applications. Listeners of this podcast get a 5% discount with code of EnergyPod5 through December 31st.